everyone. We're so glad that you're with us today and have hung with us. We are um, at the end of April, May this week, so that's really hard to believe. I'm here with my good friends Jonathan and Sandy, and we're going to bring you some bite-sized PD today on data and how we can use data for better student and teacher outcomes. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm a little late to the game on Dr. Catlin Tucker. I've seen her things. I need to grab one of her books, but I follow her online and really like what she has to say. And as I was thinking about this topic, I really started pulling at some of the things that she talks about with data driven design process. And so this is just a link to a quick less than 5 minute video that really talks through the process of, I think, what we all believe that is best practice in the classroom. And really here are the key takeaways here. The pre-assessment happens before you've actually planned your lesson. So before you actually get started with the roadmap of where you're going, you see where your students are. And then you use that data to design your lesson using the blended learning strategies and the universal design for learning principles. And then those informal checks all throughout your lesson are so important. Those non-graded quizzes, the explain in your own words, the exit tickets that you give your students. And then your response to all of that is that differentiation, that personalization, and then the summative assessment. And it really is kind of the cycle that starts over with every new concept and everything you're teaching in the classroom. So I really love this video. It is definitely worth the 5 minute watch. And I know we're towards the end of the year, but we still have things going on in the classroom, and we can use this as a time to really try to refine the process before we pick up with kids again in the fall. And then next, I came across something that she had online as well, because sometimes we think of data just as these hard numbers, right? Testing data, and that's all great as well. But what about the data that we get from student feedback? How important that is to drive what we're doing in the classroom. And this is a fun way to gather data, the keep, start, and stop method. So really asking kids, what should we keep doing that we're doing? What do you love about our process? What is something that you really enjoy? Or what am I not doing? What is something you would love to see built into the process that we could start doing? And the stop, like, what are we doing that you don't think is very productive in the classroom? And I think it's really great to offer kindergarten through 12th graders this experience, because I think we gain a lot when we really ask for students' insight. And then the last thing I thought of that I was a big fan of using when I was in the classroom, Google Forms or whatever feedback tool that you love the most, but really giving the students a chance to share and reflect on their learning. For every big project we had in class, I would always have this feedback form, and you can see some sample questions. I would ask them things like, rate this project from not engaging or fun at all to the most engaging project you've ever been a part of, or what did you learn during this project? Is there something else I need to know about this project? Because let's face it, they work through it. You see the dynamic that's happening in the class if it's an in-class project, and then it's kind of like it gets graded and you move on, and you don't really have time to talk to each student individually. So this is a really quick way. I would take this as a writing grade, so I would always ask for their best writing. Now this was a 4th grade classroom, but I loved reading the responses. So here's a couple that I just pulled out that maybe if I didn't ask this in class, ask for this feedback, ask to get this data, I may not have heard. But this one, I didn't know that a group of 9-year-olds could even have a chance of changing the world for the better. I believe it was only grown-ups that could change the world. And this is a 9-year-old typing this. Or I just want you to know Brooks and Nolan are the best partners I ever had. That informs future practices. The kids that are really going to work well together are the ones that can move on to be leaders in other groups. We worked really well. This project challenged my mind. What an awesome piece of feedback from students. The other one, this was probably the most fun school project I have done. Now, doesn't that inform my teaching? Wow, when I'm looking at projects to bring back, this is something I should bring back because my students really enjoyed it. So anyway, I hope this helps. Just little bite-sized tips on how we're looking at data. Jonathan, I'll pass it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Karissa. Love your ideas. I was talking to Karissa right before we started about how Catlin Tucker has some real in the classroom videos for you to be looking at on YouTube. So I highly recommend those just so that you can see how she uses data to inform her blended instruction. And I love your idea of student feedback because that definitely is data that can help us make great decisions for kids. I have a couple of things bite-sized as well to share with you. One of my favorite podcasts recently has been Melissa and Lori Love Literacy, as our district and the state really is really rethinking literacy within schools. This has been a really great resource for me. And the podcast that I have linked here, the episode, really talks about using data for responsive teaching. And I'm a changed and reformed balanced literacy teacher. And so sometimes it's difficult to unlearn some of those strategies that I used in the past. So really thinking about identifying those specific areas of need and spending time there. In the past, I was like, all right, we're going to make sure that we focus on all 5 components of literacy. And maybe not a great idea because I had students that didn't have phonics foundational skills. And I really needed to spend more unbalanced time there. And of course, that comprehension of vocabulary and other pieces are still very important to teach, but I needed to spend more of my time in that area helping students be able to read so then they could comprehend it independently. And that just goes along with that spending more instructional time in that area. Also breaking down those skills into small chunks, which we know is best practice. But sometimes when we say, here, read a text, and we haven't broken down the skills or activated that background knowledge, it's so important for all students. And then measuring progress often. I think this is something that I was somewhat good at, but I wasn't necessarily focused on discrete enough skills when I was measuring that progress. So this is a great episode that I would highly recommend checking out, along with the many others that are there. The other thing that I love to do is craft anecdotal note forms. And I love this because there's no right way to do it. And there's lots of different ways that teachers can collect anecdotal notes. I have a couple here that I use when I work with students and teachers throughout our districts, but it really captures those in the moment snapshots of students. We're constantly part of our job assessing through our observation. And I think sometimes when we do that observation, we can forget really important things that happened with students or conversations that happened. And so I've got one for decoding, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, then another one for math. I have another one that's not here, but whenever students are engaged in group work or a STEM activity, I think that observation record is really important. If you're interested in checking these out, they are linked here. And then it also keeps all of those student notes in one place. There's been so many times where I've had a really powerful conversation with an individual student, whether one-on-one as I'm kind of checking in with students or in small group, and I've slept and I wake up the next morning and that information is no longer there. So it provides me with kind of written documentation about what's happening. And I like the little check boxes so that I can focus my conversation with students, and it streamlines and causes me to have less writing for when I coach on something. Then a little notes section, and then the 1, 2, 3, 4 is just kind of their level of understanding with that specific thing that I'm checking in on. And then the last thing I really want to talk about, which I know many teachers have a lot of these things in place, but it is so important to kind of have assessments for learning and assessment of learning. And so here's just some different assessment types that are really important for all teachers to ensure that they have within their classroom. That first one is universal screener, and a lot of times those are mandated for teachers, but making sure we use it as a universal screener. Oftentimes, universal screeners are testing so many things that it's really hard to narrow in on the focus of where the problem is when we're using universal screener data. Universal screeners really are just to tell us who's at risk and who's not. So using it for that purpose is really important, and not using it to really go in and dig deep on what that student necessarily needs. Diagnostic assessments are Very, very important because it does help us drill in to what a specific student needs. So that universal screener is going to tell us who's at risk, and then that diagnostic assessment is going to help us dig in to figure out which areas we need to address first with that student. So ensuring that you have a great diagnostic assessment to support that's important. And then progress monitoring along the way, whether it's through exit tickets or you have a robust progress monitoring system, is really, really important so that you can determine if the instruction that you are providing for students is truly supporting their learning and their attainment of the skills. And then lastly, that outcome evaluation is important just to know how students are performing within that unit of study at the end of an assessment. So making sure that all 4 of these assessment types are available for you are really, really key in making sure that we help students get to where they need to be. Sandy, you're next.
Oh my goodness, that was such good stuff, Karissa. How cool to hear that student feedback. I just so powerful, and I hope that warms your heart and any teacher's heart that gets that kind of feedback like that. And Jonathan, you made me think about. I'm so happy that we have technology now instead of my clipboard that I had all my notes on, all my note cards with each kiddo's name that I was flipping back to and then having to go back. Just a great way for us to remember that the focus is on the kiddo, right? I liked what you said of, I don't like to always type. I don't like to always be writing. We need to focus on that kiddo, but all of this information that we've collected is so important. And so one of the things that I heard at a conference quite some time ago was thinking about kiddos learning as a progression toward mastery. So when we are looking at all of these different ways to assess kiddos, we're really looking at where do they fall in that progression toward mastery, right? Knowing that some of our kiddos are not going to always master it the way others are. And so I have got some different articles that I was going to share and one blog or one video. But today I wanted to start with how to get your students thinking about their own learning, really getting them to think through what do I need to do to become the best learner. So I really just pulled out some quotes from this first one. One of the things to think about is I found that students were often told what to learn, but were rarely taught how to learn. So often we're teaching our kids, like, you need to learn this standard and this skill and how to do this. But what about teaching them how to do it, the steps that they need? We were all taught how to become teachers, right? We had to learn along the way, but how to. So really thinking about that. And remembering that kiddos as early as kindergarten, that teachers can teach them that metacognition native skills through planning, monitoring, and evaluating their learning. Kindergartners can do that. You just have to be creative, as well as 12th graders. I really thought this was interesting, that goal setting has been linked to a 32% increase in achievement. If we get our kiddos setting goals, think about what that might look like. And remembering, again, that it's a progression toward mastery. That doesn't mean that they're going to be mastering it quickly. It just means that we're going to see that increased achievement. Jumping over to number 4, thinking about planning. Teachers can help students think about the changes they need to make in their daily behavior and habits in order to get from where they are now to where they want to be. I think that both of those pieces, your behavior and your habits, really thinking about what am I going to do to become a better learner and a better thinker. And then looking at number 5, the monitoring, they may lack a sense of self-efficacy or the belief that their efforts affect their actions or fail to change their approach. So really having kiddos think about, how is your effort impacting your achievement? And again, I think the past couple of times that we've all been together, we've talked about celebrating, really making sure we celebrate the growth, not the mastery, but celebrate the growth. And then the last one is our role as teachers is to coach our students. It's not to tell, but it's to coach them. So having the kiddos start to think about, and these really made me think of our professional learning community questions into 4, but what am I working toward? What progress have I made so far? And where do I want to go from here? Kind of thinking about, again, as a teacher, what do I want my kids to know? How will I know? What will I do when they do? And what will I do when they don't? That's kind of the same thing, shifting it to the kiddo. What am I working toward? What's my progress so far? And what do I do from here? So this was an article from Edutopia, just a great little article. So Jonathan, let's go ahead and jump to the next one. This one is really about using data to instruct our English language learners. And really thinking about the looking and the understanding of data as two pieces. It's our technology, right? Our data warehouse, if we're talking about some of that massive data that we're thinking of, and then the human capacity. How data literate are we as educators? Do we understand that data when we're looking at it? So one of the things that I think was really important that this brought to my attention and that reminder is that all of our MLLs are different. So and this goes for all students, right? I think when we talk about this is really all students. We can't compare all of our English language learners, all of our multilingual language learners. We can't compare them to each other because they're all at different phases along that progression. They're all at different levels of their WIDA scores. So I can't take a level 1 and compare it to a level 3. And I think lots of times we group our EL learners together to look at their achievement. And we can't do that. And I think we do the same thing with our students with special needs and our classroom students. We have to think about all the different factors that feed into that. So I'm just really thinking about how can we compare them to similar students. Maybe we have a level 4 student that is similar to a special education student. Could we compare those kiddos together if we needed to? Sure, and see if their growth has happened over time. Maybe we need to look at a level 1 student with another level 2 student in their writing. Maybe we've got a student that's a level 3 for speaking, but a level 1 in writing, comparing those together. Really thinking about this as just an overall good reminder of keeping our data consistent. I think if we've got that data flying all over the place, it's hard to follow. This one is so, so important. Have a clear picture of students from all teachers and in all settings. I am a huge advocate, and I know this has been an unpopular opinion for several other educators. The best place that you can get to learn your students is on the playground if you're in elementary. And I know it's a lot because it's hot and it's cold and kids are falling and doing all sorts of things, but you can really learn how to kiddos doing and their understanding of different things when you're in those other spaces that aren't in the classroom. So thinking about when we're with our EL learners, how can we get that good picture of them on the playground when they're using their social language and their academic language so that I can put those pieces together. And then also thinking about, as a classroom teacher, how can I go to my related arts teachers? How can I go to the cafeteria aide? Can she give me some data on this kiddo, possibly? Thinking about my EL teacher. So all of these different people and settings help to get you the clear picture. Couple of other ways to help think about that data is parent input. And then the other one that I think for all of our students is consider the other factors. Don't forget about the trauma. Don't forget about home situations. Don't forget about happy celebratory situations, quinceanero, those types of things. Those are all factors that can play into that student data. So remember that piece. And then the last one, this was just kind of refreshing to hear. It really took me back to the 101 data understanding. And so this is a YouTube video by Kathleen Jasper, and she really just kind of goes back and breaks down all of that data jargon to help us understand. So really thinking about how do we become a data-driven instructor, and how do we shift from like the what now to the what's next, thinking about everything that we do, using data to make my instructional decisions. I'm not going to talk too much about this one because Karisa and Jonathan did a great job. That as they were talking, I was like, oh yeah, this is what I was going to talk about. So really thinking about that piece, collecting that data from the beginning of the lesson all the way through the end. Really thinking about how am I going to capture some pre-data so that I can guide my teaching. I think one of the biggest things we do as teachers is, we have our pacing guides and we have to teach all of this stuff. But if my kiddos know it, what can I do to enrich it? And why do I need to continue to teach it and teach it and teach it if they've already got it? Could I have collected that data at the beginning of the lesson so that I can either spend some more time supporting my striving learners and push those upper ones? So I think that's a really important piece. And all the different types of data, qualitative and quantitative, summative versus formative. I think it's important to go back and use that chart that Jonathan shared, because as we are getting into testing season, different levels of teaching, I think we forget about what each of those types of data are, all the way from administrators down to first year teachers. So really making sure we're continuing to have those conversations about what is all of this data, what does it mean, what do I do with it, and how does it impact my teaching? I think that's the critical piece. And the last one is really make it the focus of your PLC. We too often spend our PLC planning for field day. All of these things are important. Don't get me wrong. Kids need to have an amazing field day. They need to have amazing field trips. But is that what our PLC should revolve around? Pull that data. Let's talk about that data. Get our 5 minutes at the beginning if we need to get those other pieces out of the way, and then jump in so that we can use the data and these ideas from Karisa and Jonathan to help make sure that we are taking our kids further down that progression toward mastery. So, and with that, thank you all so much. This has been, I was just reflecting back. I don't know how many of these we've done, but I love it so much. And I'm so happy that we got to talk about data in this time of iLearn, right in the middle of it. So make sure that you scan that QR code and give us some feedback on this episode. And then we are going to finish our next one with our end of the year reflection. So how can we reflect as educators, reflect as humans, and reflect with our kiddos on all the awesome things that they did. Thank you all for joining us. Make sure you follow Keep Indiana Learning on Twitter, on Instagram, all the social media platforms, and then you can scan the QR code to follow Jonathan, Karisa, and myself on our social media platforms as well. So Karisa, Jonathan, thank you so much. Everyone, have a wonderful day, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.